A couple of weeks ago, Bethesda invited me down to London to get some hands-on time with Redfall, the new vampire-killing first-person game from Arkane. I was super excited about this. I'm a big Arkane fan, and in this video I'm going to share all of my impressions of the game from getting some hands-on time with it, both the good and the bad. So if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get started. For context, Bethesda did pay for transport for this trip, but they didn't ask us to say anything in particular about the game, and they haven't asked to see the video before it goes live. So you can be assured that these are my honest impressions of the game. We couldn't capture our own gameplay, so all of the video you're seeing in this is B-roll that was provided by Arkane. We got to play a demo for about 90 minutes. We had a little presentation kind of explaining the story and explaining some of the ideas behind the game. And then we got to play for those 90 minutes as a character of our choice. There's 4 characters to choose from. I actually kept on backing out and choosing a different character, so I got to play as all 4 of them, which was cool. We got to explore the open world of Redfall, complete some side missions, and complete one major story mission. Sadly, we weren't allowed to play co-op. Everything we did was just in single player. They also gave us a bunch of skill points so we could try out the skill tree, try out some of the different abilities. So, what is Redfall? Redfall is a co-op first-person shooter where you have abilities as well, so it's not all about guns, and you're fighting vampires and human enemies in this open world town of Redfall. It really is an open world. You seem to have like a base in the middle of it, and then you can go out to do different side missions to go try and find some loot or to complete the story missions that are a little bit more linear but still take place within that open world. The whole thing is super like gothic and dark, but it's also got a bit of a sense of humor. It's got a little bit of kind of fun about it, particularly with the player characters, their voice lines, the sorts of abilities they use. It isn't a game that takes itself too seriously. Since it's a first-person shooter, let's talk about the guns. You get some fairly ordinary-looking guns. You get some pistols, some shotguns, assault rifles, sniper rifles, and they all kind of do what you'd expect. But since this is a looter shooter and you're constantly finding weapons, and I mean like seriously constantly finding them, in the hour and a half I was playing, I think I probably found like 20-25 new guns, and each one of them has a full page of kind of the statistics for it, what level it is, how much damage it does, but also different modifiers. Like you might find a shotgun that's got a stake on the end of it, because when you kill the vampires in this game, you actually first of all put them into a down state, and then you have to go finish them off, and one of the ways you can do that is by using the stake on the end of the gun. You can go up to them, hit the melee button, and do a kind of execution thing that will make sure they don't revive, that they don't come back from the dead. You can also finish off the vampires by using elemental effects. So lots of the guns will have like electric rounds or fire rounds, and then you can use things in the environment and stuff like that. So like a petrol can to start a fire, because then if you kill a vampire in that, they'll just burn away. So for example, I had a sniper rifle and I wanted to shoot some vampires, but I was thinking, this isn't going to work because I'm going to down the vampire, but then I can't get over there to finish them off. But I had a sniper rifle that had elemental rounds, so that meant as soon as I got the headshot on a vampire, they immediately just kind of disintegrated, like vaporized. So that's pretty cool. Like you have to think about how those elements are going to be used, and you also have to be super careful about how they're used in the environment. I killed myself like 2 or 3 times just by using fire weapons like the flare gun. There's a flare gun that isn't very good against humans, but it's pretty good against vampires because it sets them on fire straight away, and I just happened to use it near something that was ignitable, like some fuel leaking out of a car or something like that, and then it blew me up too. And the explosions from things like cars exploding are absolutely huge and can easily one-shot you. So you do have to be a bit careful with stuff like that, and I'm curious to see how that will work in co-op. There's also some slightly wackier weapons. There's a UV beam that you can use to kind of freeze or petrify vampires. That doesn't do anything to humans, it just kind of winds them up because you're shining a torch in their eyes. But with the vampires at least, it can be really useful to hold them in place, especially if there's a big group of them, and then you can use other conventional weapons to finish them off. It did really feel like I was constantly needing to swap through weapons, use the entire arsenal. You seem to be able to have like 4 equipped at once, like in Borderlands, and you can switch between them like when you're running out of ammo, or just if the needs of the fight change. There was one really powerful weapon, a stake launcher, but you only ever had like 3 shots with it, so I would use that whenever I saw a particularly menacing vampire, but you don't want to waste it on humans or anything like that. Then you can just use the assault rifle. In terms of how the weapons felt, it was a bit of a mixed bag. Like when you were fighting humans, it felt great, like you could one-shot them if you were hitting them in the head, and because ammo was kind of scarce a lot of the time, that felt really good, like being able to take down a massive group of of enemies because your aim was good. But then when we're fighting vampires, it did feel a bit like they were kind of bullet sponges, and especially the normal weapons, things like assault rifles, just felt kind of ineffective, like you weren't doing that much to them and you just had to pump round into round after them, which I'm not a massive fan of. That being said, there were ways around it, so you could use the stake launcher to one-shot them, you could freeze them like I said with the UV cannon, and obviously you can use your abilities to take care of them. I like the idea of the vampires being more of a threat, but just pumping loads of bullets into a bullet sponge doesn't feel that great. The other half of the combat are the abilities. So each character has a group of abilities that you can use, and they have fairly short cooldowns, so you can use them pretty much all of the time. And as I said, I got to go through all 4 characters and just try them out. The first character is Jacob Boyer. This is this kind of brooding, gothy guy that has this kind of ghost raven thing with him. And his ability, first of all, he can send a raven out to go mark enemies, and you can upgrade that later on because there's a skill tree for all of these, where like the raven, I think, can increase the damage you do against those enemies. That didn't seem massively useful to me. He also has a cloak that lets you sneak around invisible. That was actually super helpful because there's a lot of the time you kind of don't want to fight a group of enemies from the place where you're standing, so you want to get up to a rooftop or something like that, and you can use the cloak to sort of move around a battlefield. That was really cool, but his ultimate was just hilarious. I absolutely loved it. It's a sniper rifle that appears, and it auto locks onto everyone's heads. It's like you've got an aimbot basically, and as fast as you can click the button, you'll just be constantly getting headshots. I managed to get stuck into a room with a bunch of vampires surrounding me and then activated the ultimate and just kept on clicking. And I'm pretty sure my character was spinning around using a sniper rifle to kill a bunch of vampires who were a foot away from me, which probably looked awesome, but on my screen it was just kind of a blur because it was all happening so fast. I absolutely loved that ability. The next character is Devinder, who is an influencer within the Redfall universe. He's kind of interested in cryptids, and he's made a load of homemade devices to help him fight them. So he has an arc javelin, which is just a big spear that you throw and it electrocutes anything nearby. It didn't seem like you could throw it very far, which was a little bit disappointing. He also has the translocate, which is the teleport. Now, anyone who's played an Arkane game in the past knows teleports are often one of the best things about them. And this one feels a little bit clunky. It's nowhere near as much fun as the ones that we had in Dishonored. Instead, you kind of throw a disc out. Again, you can't throw it that far. And then you activate it again to teleport to where it is. It doesn't feel very instant. It doesn't feel very fluid. And I didn't get to use it for very long. But when I was, I just kind of forgot about it in fights, really. I more used it to get to a new location to start a fight. You know, like throwing it on top of a rooftop. So then I could teleport up there to get started. His ultimate ability that he only gets occasionally is the black light. So this is kind of a staff that he plants in the ground, and then it spreads UV light everywhere so it'll freeze any vampires nearby. I'm sure that's probably useful in some situations, but it wasn't very exciting to use. You just kind of plonk it down, stuff gets frozen, then you can go around and use your normal abilities or guns to fight them. So yeah, I didn't find Devinder all that exciting. He is the main character who you're seeing in most of this B-roll. Next we have Layla, who has some kind of psychic powers, and she has a really cool umbrella which works as a shield. She kind of opens up an umbrella in front of her, it absorbs a load of damage, and then you can fire it back out. I really like that. That was a lot of fun. It was cool kind of pushing positions using that, even knowing that loads of enemies were going to be shooting you. Then she has a lift, which is literally a lift, like it's an elevator, that you kind of summon, and then if you walk into it, it throws you up in the air a bit. I think the idea is that you'd be able to use this to get to places you otherwise wouldn't be able to get to, but it didn't feel very useful. It didn't feel like it throws you high enough in the air, and I couldn't see any skill increases or anything that would let you do that. I wanted to use it to, well, just like the translocator really, to throw me up onto a rooftop so then I could use a sniper rifle or something like that. But it didn't feel like it really worked like that. It was just kind of, you could maybe get onto a second story window if you were trying really hard. So that was a little bit disappointing to me. Her ultimate is to summon her vampire ex-boyfriend. So basically she has an ex-boyfriend who is dead, I think, and she kind of does a little fist bump with him, and then he goes off to help you fight things. I used this once because I was kind of running out of time at the end of the demo, and to be honest, I didn't really notice what he was doing. I assume he was off fighting something that I couldn't see, but yeah, this didn't feel like it had a great impact either. Finally, the last character is Remy. And this is I think she's like an MIT genius or something like that. She invents stuff, and she has some really, really cool abilities that I actually really like. So she has a C4 charge that she can throw. It's just like a really powerful grenade, and it actually felt really powerful, particularly when you're fighting humans. If you could find them in a building or something and you could throw that C4 in, you would just absolutely vaporize them. It felt so powerful. That felt really good. And then you also have like this little robot thing that follows you around. It's pretty cute. It kind of has, you know, expressions and things like that. I like that. And you can make that distract the enemies. So you can press a button, it's a siren on it, and it will start waving a little antenna around, and all of the enemies will go towards that, so then you can take them out. Or if you're particularly cruel, you can activate that, throw C4 on it, and then detonate it when all the enemies are close, and take a load of them out as well as your little friend. I don't think the little robot, I think Ribbon or something it's called, I don't think it can actually die, but sometimes you might need to go kind of revive it a little bit just to keep it going. Now, her ultimate was called Mobilize, and essentially it just heals everyone who's nearby. That probably would have been very useful in co-op, but obviously we were playing single player. I didn't find that very useful. And again, even when you're healing yourself, it doesn't feel very impactful. And that to me was the problem with a lot of these abilities. I really liked Remy's C4, that was super cool. I really liked the sniper rifle ultimate ability where you're sort of getting loads of headshots very quickly. But pretty much all of the other abilities, just you couldn't really feel the impact of what was happening. They weren't spectacular to use, they weren't sort of as interesting to use as maybe the Dishonored abilities or the Prey abilities. They all just felt a little bit tame. Now I did look through the skill tree, so I saw like how you can upgrade them and stuff like that. But it never felt like there was anything that was massively impactful. It never felt like there was anything that would make them do what I wanted them to do. They just all felt a little bit weak. But they do all have super short cooldowns, so I guess the idea is you're using them all the time, rather than having something super impactful that you can only use every like once a minute or once every 2 minutes. The world of Redfall looks super cool. Like from a distance, everything looks really nice. It's got a very, very stylized effect where it's not quite like comic booky, but it's not realistic either. A little bit in the way that kind of Dishonored was, I guess, but it also doesn't look like Dishonored. You can see it for yourself in the video here. But yeah, it looked really cool, but when you did get up close to some of the buildings, it felt like some of them kind of lacked detail, like they didn't feel like they're very alive. Now, Arkane are obviously masters of doing that kind of environmental storytelling, and there was plenty of that. Like, you'd find little situations where you could work out what had happened just from the props and the assets that were dotted around. Sometimes you find little, like, messages written by people or recorded by people, so you get a little bit of that background story. All of that was there. That was very, very cool. But just in general, the world felt a little bit bland. One thing I noticed that seemed a bit strange is that a lot of the interiors are actually surprisingly confined. Considering this is going to be a 4-player co-op game, I can imagine that a lot of them will get incredibly chaotic with everyone using all their different abilities. You know, there's going to be the little robot running around, there's going to be C4 going off, there's going to be a like ghost umbrella, a ghost ex-boyfriend or vampire ex-boyfriend, a ghost raven flying around. There's going to be tons of stuff happening. If that's all happening inside a room, it's going to be absolutely crazy. As I wandered around the open world, I found a few different side missions, so like there were these nest type things that if you managed to destroy them, then the vampire influence around would kind of go, which I think would make the vampires weaker around you, and you could kind of go into a different dimension almost, and then do some fighting in there, destroy some things. And then there was a kind of cool idea where you had a few seconds to grab as much loot as you can before you had to get out of that reality, otherwise it would all collapse on you. I've got no idea what would happen if it did collapse, whether it would kill you or just kick you out, but that was kind of fun, this idea that as soon as you hit the last objective, you've now got like 20 seconds to go and grab as much loot as you possibly can and get out. I really enjoyed that. I did really enjoy just kind of wandering around Redfall and completing these little side quests and getting into little fights. And because you're constantly getting loot, I imagine if this was our own save file and we're actually making progress, then it could be pretty addictive, just deciding to hop on for a little bit, go kill a few vampires, go clear out one of these nests or something like that, and see if you can get an upgrade and see if you can level up a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about the story mission, but I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, so I'll talk in very vague terms. I thought the story mission was good. Like, the setting was in this massive mansion, it looked very cool, and there was a really interesting story within it that was a lot darker in tone compared to like the dialogue and stuff that I'd heard in the open world. The pacing of it was very strange. Like, there was a lot of combat at the beginning, and then there was kind of a treasure hunt, but the treasure hunt was cool. Like, you had to go and find certain objects using clues. Like, you didn't just have objective markers on a screen or anything like that. You actually had to read something, think about what it said, and then work out where these different different things were. It was just a little bit like once you'd worked it out, it was a lot of kind of wandering around and then going and watching a bit of story, go somewhere else, stop, watch a bit of story. And while that story was good, it maybe wasn't the most engaging gameplay-wise. So in conclusion, I know I might have sounded quite negative throughout this video, but I am cautiously optimistic about Redfall. I really like the setting and the story. I'm kind of interested to find out more about that. I enjoyed the combat a lot, and I think the looting and everything, that side of it, could be a lot of fun, particularly playing with a friend. I would love to play some co-op of this to see whether it's too chaotic or whether it's just about right. The big thing that disappointed me about it really was the abilities. Just they didn't feel snappy enough, they didn't feel impactful enough. It felt like there was a couple of abilities here and there that felt really good, but by and large they just seemed kind of anemic and a little bit boring. It is worth remembering that this is still an in-progress version of the game, so they might have changed a bunch of the abilities, they might have changed a load of the balancing and things like that. And obviously, in the full game, you'll have more skill points, so you'll be able to craft the build exactly the way you want it. Maybe all of that stuff will end up working out. But whatever happens, I am excited to play Redfall when it releases. The game is coming out on the 2nd of May, which is only like a month and a half away, so not too long to wait at all. And it's going to be coming out on Game Pass, so if you're a subscriber to that, you're going to be able to check it out. I will definitely be streaming this as soon as it goes live, so make sure you subscribe, turn your notifications on, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.